All right, next day for back testing is December 6th, right here. It is, again, under the 8. The 8 is coming down, the 8 exponential moving average. And then we marked out the high and lows of the previous day. That's what these white lines are. You can see that this candle did pop up over the 8 EMA and over the previous day high, but it reversed and came back down and closed near the low of its day, never reaching the low of the previous day, but still closing down low of its own. All right, so we're going to examine that day. First, we're going to look at the 5-minute chart. Here we go. Here is where it had gone up and came down, closing below the high of the previous day, right? Closing below the high of the previous day. So right here, this line represents the high of the previous day. It went up, came down, closed, started going below it. Okay, so on the 5-minute chart, we can see what looks like a breaker block type of pattern with a fair value created right here in this area right here, down to this candle. It comes up pretty high into it, almost to the order block area, which is sometimes a better entry. Fair values sometimes get violated and it goes directly to an order block. But we're not doing that kind of back test. We're still back testing the breaker blocks and the fair value gaps only. But what I do like about this is that you can easily tell once it closed below the high of the previous day. Pintail, tries to get up over the top of that thing and then comes down like this. We could definitely would be great if there was some order fair value blocks created over here, but just simply not on the 5-minute chart. The one that we do get right here, again, it goes up to what this would be considered up here, an order block to the T, and that's as high as it gets. But those are good signs. If we combine our knowledge from one strategy to another and combine strategies, order blocks, and fair value gaps in the future, we'll be doing that. We know that we can tell the fair value gap it's not working on this, but we noticed where it is working. Okay, look at this is the second time this has gone to the order block up here. So I'm going to trust and build more confidence that this is probably going to keep going down. Okay, then when it does give us a clean fair value gap right here, it just never comes up to test it. All right, so that's very difficult for our back testing strategy today with the fair value gaps. It just didn't give us a real good entry. But using multiple strategy concepts, we would see a consolidation underneath the previous low, and we would understand that it's probably going to go down. Using a very tight stop loss above those pintails, we could have entered in on that. And another thing, using the order block strategies in the future where we see it coming back up to the order blocks, which we'll explain later, is another idea for an entry. So having multiple strategies, this could have produced some profit for the day, but it did not produce any profit for the for the fair value gap strategy and the breaker block strategy that we're looking at. That's the 5-minute chart right there. Let's look at the 1-minute chart. Is there anything different? Nice straight down move, real strong move at the open and 9:30, and then it just tests again. Test that high of previous day. And does it give us any kind of fair values? Let's see. It does a fair value up here, but it never goes up that high, does it? Nope. Doesn't quite make it up that high with this, and there's no other fair value gaps except for this one right here, which it breaks through. And it looks like on the drop here, right here, this is what I'm talking about. We have a fair value gap on this side in the area of this pivot right here. All right, so this is an interesting area. All this mess right here messes with your head though. But as it's starting to create a lower high in this area and breaks down right here, creates another fair value gap in this area, what does it do? It comes up and tests that area and then shoots straight down again. So I'm not sure, you know, in the big picture, we might be able to have better real-time unfolding of price action in real time. Witnessing the speed of the candles and all that makes a huge difference than going back and looking at a chart that's already been developed and without that emotion and without that speed and momentum of price development. It's really, you got to get the experience in real time on this stuff. So it's possible that we would have been very interested in this trade right here for a short, because of the double fair value gap that it created one over here on this side, one over here on this side in the same area of this pivot after putting in this test of the previous day high and after putting in a lower high, developing down, displacing right here. And I'm pretty sure I would have been pretty interested in something like that if I could keep my risk small and I would shoot for this pivot down here. I might have tried that trade. I'll be honest with you. I might have tried that trade. Here is a fair value gap that I didn't notice before. Right here. And it goes back up into this weak area here. And it created a lower high yet again. And then it displaced down, came back up and tested that fair value gap. It did create a fair value gap right there. That would have been a beautiful test. Here's another fair value gap that I didn't notice before. And it tested it. Well, it didn't quite come up over here to that level, but right here in this area it did. Here's a fair value gap that was tested multiple times to the downside, at least in this area right here. Fair value gap tested 1, 2, 3, 4 times and went down all those. Then it violates it right here, and then we just chop around. All right, and I like this. Let's examine this area here. What's interesting about this sometimes is you get a fair value gap that, oh, here it is. Fair value gap going in both directions becomes support. Interesting. I don't know if we can see that on the video. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit, because studying these things and getting used to seeing it with experience in real time, there's nothing that replaces that. But here on the chart, okay, we've got, let's just look. Here's another area right here, a double fair value gap going down and going up in the same area right here. Now, they're not perfectly matched, but there's the one going up, there's the one going down. That area where these boxes intersect is the fair value gap zone. All right, here is a fair value gap going down, and right there in that area, and almost matching perfectly. Here's the one going up. So there's a slight difference between these two. Let's mark them next to each other. Where these boxes intersect are the areas where both value gaps are intersecting, and look at the support it gives. All right, here up in this part right here is a fair value gap tested and went up. Probably could have got some profit on that, or at least break even on it. When it comes back down in the same exact area, creates a fair value gap to the downside, and in the intersection of these two boxes is where it comes up to test and goes right back down for a nice move down. So what I'm noticing on this study is that if we can't get a clean breaker block, you know, then using the direction of the stock, which in this case would be bearish, after it closes underneath the low of the previous day, or the high of the previous day, once it closes below that white line, below the 8 EMA, starts heading down over here on the on this would be this is bearish. This is bearish. So I'm looking for bearish activity. Here's a good activity. It comes back up, tests several times. Here's where it gives us a good fair value gap to the downside. Here it gives us this one to the downside. Once we get down in these areas down here, here's another one to the downside. At least this move here, tests it, and eventually closes above it. But there's a lot of good movement here. Once we start, I'm not sure if I'd go long on this. I'm not sure if I'd go long on this, and unless I can identify a breaker block, which would be something like this, and I had reason to believe this was at the bottom for the day. Then we got a fair value gap in this area where it tests and goes up. Could have got something on this little move up here, trailing my stop up, breaking even on it possibly. If we can pull a breaker block out of this somehow, where it goes like this, this, and breaks up. I'm not sure how that would be, but there is a breaker block and a fair value gap right here. Does it test it? Yeah, it tests it right here and right here. It doesn't go up very far, but like I said, we don't know how far something's going to go up. If we get a breaker block situation and we get a fair value gap out of that, And the important thing is can we match these levels to any other kind of variable like Fibonacci on a higher time chart, 4-hour chart, hour chart, whatever the case may be, which we're not using at the moment. But if we could see on other time charts, maybe it's at a major support level somehow, a structural support level, even a 200 moving average on certain time charts or whatever the case may be, we would have confidence that, yeah, let's try this to the long side, even though, it's quite bearish on the day chart. Catching some bounces in this wouldn't be impossible, but probably less probable. We had a better chance going short on it. And when we finally do get the best areas to short are right here. Here's one actually. Here's another fair value gap right there that tested to the downside pretty well. So these two fair value gaps to the downside, in our bias being stronger to the downside, doesn't mean you can't catch something to the upside, but especially when you see this pattern. I like this pattern. This pattern can give you some more confidence. But to the downside would have been preferable on this kind of day. So that's the 1 minute. That's our breakdown and analysis of that for that particular day. So we'll see you on the next back test. Peace.